Alright, buckle up, because Elie Wiesel's night starts off cozy and normal, then flips the switch into full-on horror mode faster than you can say plot twist. We're diving into chapters 1 through 3, where innocence gets absolutely shredded, and the world goes from meh, things are okay to a nightmare straight out of the darkest survival game. So, picture this, it's the early 1940s in Sayet, a chill little town in Hungary. Life's pretty good for Eliezer, Elie for short, a young Jewish teen who's all about his family, religion, and studying the mystical side of Judaism. His vibes are majorly bookish main character energy. His dad is respected in the community, but not exactly a hugger, while his mom and sisters are keeping the home front steady. It's all very slice-of-life anime, until it isn't. Enter Moishi the Beetle, the local spiritual guru and all-around sweet guy. Elie is low-key obsessed with him because Moishi's got that wise mentor vibe. They talk about deep stuff like God, the universe, and the meaning of life. But then Moishi gets deported, along with other foreign Jews in Sayet. Everyone's like, tough break, but it doesn't affect us, right? Spoiler alert, big mistake. Moishi comes back months later, and he's not okay. Dude's seen some stuff. He tries to warn everyone that the Nazis are out here committing straight-up atrocities, like mass shootings in the forest, but no one listens. They're all, poor Moishi's lost it. Classic prophet nobody believes trope, except it's real life, and the stakes are sky-high. Elie's family and the rest of the town stay deep in denial, convinced that their quiet little life can't possibly be disrupted. It's like they think they're NPCs in someone else's game. Fast forward to 1944. Sayet gets major plot development, the Nazis roll in. At first, they're all about playing it cool. The soldiers are polite, and the vibe is oddly chill, but it's giving calm before the storm. Then the restrictions hit. Jews can't leave their homes, keep valuables, or even exist in public spaces without being hassled. Oh, and they're forced to wear yellow stars, which Elie sarcastically calls a badge of honor. The whole town's still clinging to hope, though, like, it's just a phase. It'll pass. Spoiler, it doesn't. Next thing you know, the Jews of Sayet are herded into ghettos, little fenced-off areas that feel like cages. Elie and his family get packed into one of these, but even then, people are like, at least we're still in our hometown. Denial? Still strong. Meanwhile, Elie's starting to feel the pressure, but he sticks close to his dad, who's trying to keep the family steady. It's the kind of grim keep calm and carry on energy that makes your chest tighten just reading about it. Then comes the big twist, deportation. The Nazis roll up with their "you're all leaving" energy, and things get chaotic. Families are packed into train cars like sardines, and it's a total dystopian vibe. Elie and his family are shoved onto a cattle car with a bunch of other townsfolk, and the journey is absolutely dehumanizing. There's no food, no space, and the stench is unbearable. It's basically the worst road trip ever, except there's no destination on the map. On the train, we meet one of the most haunting side characters, Madame Schachter. She's a middle-aged woman who starts freaking out, screaming about fire and flames. At first, everyone's like, calm down, lady, you're scaring the kids. But she won't stop. It's giving Cassandra from Greek mythology vibes, where she's saying something real, but no one believes her. The passengers even try to shut her up by tying her and gagging her, which is just heartbreaking. Elie watches all this, trying to process the growing horror. After days of misery, the train finally stops. Everyone's thinking, maybe this is a work camp or something manageable. Nope. They're in Auschwitz, aka Nightmare Central. The smell hits first, a sickening mix of burning flesh and smoke. Elie doesn't fully register what it is yet, but you can feel the dread sinking in. Madame Schachter's fire vision suddenly makes sense, and it's a chilling moment. As soon as they step off the train, it's chaos. Nazi officers with attack dogs are barking orders, and families are being separated left and right. Elie's mom and little sister Tsipra are sent one way, while he and his dad are sent another. It's a gut punch. Elie doesn't know it yet, but that's the last time he'll ever see them. The separation scene feels like a cold, sharp knife cutting through any last shred of normalcy. Then comes the infamous selection. The Nazis are sizing everyone up, deciding who's fit to work and who's heading straight to the gas chambers. It's horrifying. Elie lies about his age, saying he's 18 instead of 15, and his dad claims he's 40 instead of 50. Somehow, they both pass, but the tension is unbearable. You can practically hear a death toll ding every time someone fails. As Elie and his dad shuffle through the camp, they see things that shatter their souls. Giant flames from the crematorium, piles of clothes from the murdered, and the sheer machinery of death. Elie, who's always been so deeply religious, starts to question everything. He's like, how could God let this happen? It's a heartbreaking shift, watching this kid's faith crumble under the weight of unspeakable horror. The first night at Auschwitz is pure trauma. Elie hears prisoners crying and praying, but he can't bring himself to join in. Instead, he feels a mix of anger, fear, and numbness. He writes later that this was the night his childhood and his belief in a just, merciful God died. It's heavy, and it hits you right in the gut. They're stripped, shaved, disinfected, and handed prison uniforms, losing every shred of their identity. Elie's world narrows to pure survival. He and his dad cling to each other, knowing that staying together is their only source of strength. The camp routine kicks in, endless roll calls, barely any food, and brutal treatment from the guards. Life becomes a bleak grind, with no end in sight. And just when you think it can't get worse, they're marched to another camp, Birkenau, the killing center of Auschwitz. The atmosphere there is even darker, if that's possible. Elie and his dad are stuck in this hellscape, stripped of their dignity and humanity, forced to confront death every second of every day. By the end of chapter 3, Elie's world is unrecognizable. The kid who once prayed and studied mysticism is now trapped in a waking nightmare, struggling just to keep breathing. The bond with his father becomes his lifeline, but you can feel the weight of despair pressing down on them both. It's bleak, raw, and unforgettable, a devastating look at humanity's darkest depths. Alright, let's break down the next brutal chapters of Night, where Elie's journey through the inferno of Auschwitz and beyond gets even darker and more intense than your worst survival horror game. From Auschwitz, the flames of despair to the death march, this stretch of the story is all about pushing humanity to the limit and then some. So, Elie and his dad are still clinging to each other as they navigate the madness of Auschwitz, which is less like a place and more like a real-life version of a cursed level in Dark Souls. The flames, the guards, the constant fear, it's like every corner is a boss fight, and there's no way to win. Life at Auschwitz is a miserable grind. Wake up, get shouted at, survive another roll call, do back-breaking labor, and try not to get noticed by anyone with power. The guards? Absolute villains, flexing their control like they're final bosses in this twisted game. Elie's got one thing keeping him going, his dad. Their bond is unbreakable, like Sam and Frodo, but instead of Mount Doom, they're trudging through the ashes of humanity's worst nightmare. At this point, Elie's faith in God is basically on life support. Remember when he was all about prayers and mystical teachings? Yeah, not anymore. Now he's looking around and thinking, how could a loving God let all this happen? It's not just a crisis of faith, it's a full-on philosophical beatdown. One of the most haunting parts of their time in Auschwitz is when they witness hangings in the camp. It's not just the brutality of it, it's the psychological toll. One particular execution involves a young boy, and the whole camp is forced to watch. Elie hears someone mutter, "Where is God?" and he's right there with them, wondering how something so innocent can be destroyed in such a cruel way. The imagery is burned into his memory, and you can tell it's a moment that will haunt him forever. Things don't stay static for long because Auschwitz is all about keeping everyone on edge. Elie and his dad are transferred to Buna, another camp that makes you question if there's any hope left in this world. Buna is just as bad, if not worse. Here, survival depends on your usefulness. If you're weak, sick, or just unlucky, you're gone. Poof. Game over. Elie's strategy is simple: keep his head down, stay useful, and protect his dad at all costs. It's the ultimate survival mode. At Buna, they're assigned to work in a warehouse sorting electrical parts. It's hard work, but compared to other jobs in the camp, it's not the worst. The real nightmare comes from the people around them. The guards and foremen are sadistic, like they're trying to outdo each other in cruelty. Even the prisoners are turning on each other, fighting for scraps or favor with the guards. Elie learns fast that trust is a luxury no one can afford. The tension gets ramped up when Elie's foot gets infected, and he ends up in the camp hospital. Now, you'd think a hospital would be a safe space, but nope. This is Auschwitz, remember? Word gets around that the camp is going to be evacuated, and everyone in the hospital will be left behind. Elie has a decision to make: stay and risk being executed or leave with his dad and face whatever fresh hell awaits. Spoiler, he chooses to leave. Staying with his dad is non-negotiable, even if it means marching into the unknown. Now we hit the death march, and let me tell you, this is where the story goes full attack on Titan level of despair. The Nazis force everyone to evacuate the camp in the dead of winter, marching for miles on end through the snow. People are dropping left and right, some from exhaustion, others because the guards have no patience for stragglers. If you fall, you're done. The guards are quick to clean up anyone who can't keep moving. Elie and his dad are hanging on by sheer willpower, but it's clear they're running on fumes. This march is less about physical endurance and more about mental survival. Elie starts to see how the constant trauma is stripping away everyone's humanity. People are turning into shadows of themselves, driven only by the primal urge to survive. Even Elie has moments where he questions if he can keep going. He admits to feeling tempted to let his dad fall behind, to save himself the burden of taking care of someone else. But then guilt kicks in, and he realizes he can't let go of the one thing grounding him. The march eventually ends, and the survivors are packed into open cattle cars. At this point, the conditions are beyond grim. People are starving, freezing, and fighting each other for crumbs. Elie watches in horror as someone literally kills their own father over a piece of bread. It's one of those moments that shatters whatever sliver of hope he might have had left. The brutality isn't just coming from the Nazis anymore, it's seeping into the prisoners, turning them into desperate, animalistic versions of themselves. Through all of this, Elie's dad is deteriorating fast. He's sick, weak, and barely able to keep going. Elie does everything he can to protect him, but the cracks are showing. The father-son dynamic is flipped now. Elie's the one keeping his dad alive, even when it feels like an impossible task. It's heartbreaking to watch, because you can feel how much Elie is struggling to hold on to the last bit of family he has left. By the time they arrive at their next destination, Buchenwald, Elie and his dad are barely hanging on. The death march and the train ride have left them physically and emotionally wrecked. But even in the darkest moments, there's a sliver of humanity left in Elie. He refuses to abandon his dad, no matter how much easier it would be to focus on his own survival. It's this bond, this fierce loyalty, that keeps them going even as the world around them collapses. And that's where we'll leave off for now. These chapters are a brutal dive into the depths of human suffering, but they also show the strength of the human spirit even when everything seems hopeless. Elie's journey is a reminder that in the worst circumstances, the connections we have with others can be the thing that keeps us alive. Alright, buckle up, because we're diving into the final chapters of Night, Elie Wiesel's no-holds-barred tale of survival, trauma, and resilience. These last chapters hit like the final boss in a grim RPG where the stakes are higher than ever and hope is hanging by a thread thinner than a spider's web. We're talking about Buchenwald and the aftermath, where the nightmare doesn't stop just because the war is winding down. So, picture this: Elie and his dad roll into Buchenwald after surviving the death march and that horrific train ride, and it's like the DLC from hell. They're wrecked, starved, frozen, and barely clinging to life. Buchenwald isn't exactly the chill ending zone, it's just another level of despair. And if you thought things couldn't get darker, you'd be wrong. Elie's dad, Shlomo, is at rock bottom. The man's hanging on by a thread, and you can tell his body and spirit are giving up. Elie, though? He's trying so hard to keep his dad alive. It's like he's tanking damage for his party in a losing raid battle, pushing Shlomo to eat, to drink, to just survive one more day. But Shlomo's done. He's got dysentery, and even Elie can see that this is one fight they're not winning. The other prisoners? They're not helping. Compassion has straight up left the building. Survival mode is fully activated, and people are straight savage now, stealing food, ignoring cries for help. Elie watches as his dad begs for water and gets smacked in return. And it's not even the Nazis doing all the cruelty anymore, it's other prisoners. It's like every ounce of humanity has been sucked out of this place. There's one scene that's burned into Elie's mind, his dad calling out to him, needing help. But Elie hesitates. For a split second, he thinks, maybe I should just let him go. Maybe I'd have a better shot at surviving without this burden. And the guilt of even thinking that? It's brutal. Like, imagine having that Attack on Titan-level internal conflict, where you're torn between love and survival instinct. It's raw and real and so heartbreakingly human. Then, the inevitable happens. Shlomo dies in the middle of the night. Elie doesn't even cry, he can't. At this point, he's so emotionally fried, he's basically numb. He wakes up to find his dad gone, just like that. No farewell, no closure. And as much as Elie loved his dad, there's this awful relief that creeps in. Now he doesn't have to worry about anyone but himself. It's a harsh, unfiltered truth, and Elie doesn't sugarcoat it. With Shlomo gone, Elie's just drifting. He's still in the game, but it's like his character has no purpose now. Days blur into weeks, and survival becomes this monotonous grind. The only thing keeping him alive is the bare instinct to not die. Food, shelter, avoiding the guards, that's it. No dreams, no future plans, just raw survival. And then, just when you think the story might fade out in despair, things take a turn. It's April 1945, and you can feel the tension shifting. The Nazis are scrambling because the Allies are closing in. The camp becomes chaotic, with rumors flying around like wild Pokemon. One minute, the guards are herding prisoners, the next, they're bailing like it's a sinking ship. For Elie, it's surreal. The place that has defined his every waking moment is crumbling before his eyes. Then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for, the liberation of Buchenwald. But here's the thing, it's not some cinematic, Avengers-style rescue with fireworks and cheers. It's messy and chaotic. When the American forces roll in, Elie and the other survivors are left to process their newfound freedom. And honestly, it's not the instant relief you'd expect. Elie's body is so wrecked, he ends up in a hospital, hovering between life and death. Even food feels like a trap, after months of starvation, eating normally could kill him. But the real gut punch comes when Elie looks at himself in a mirror for the first time since this whole nightmare began. The boy who loved faith, family, and learning? Gone. What he sees is a stranger, a skeleton with haunted eyes, staring back at him. It's one of those moments where the full weight of everything hits, and it's devastating. Even after the war, it's clear that survival isn't the end of the story. Elie's alive, sure, but what he's carrying, the loss, the trauma, the questions about faith and humanity, that's stuff you don't just walk away from. It stays with him, shaping who he is, how he sees the world, and how he tells his story. So, there you have it, the final stretch of Night. It's not a feel-good story, but it's one that sticks with you, hard. Elie's journey is a brutal reminder of how far humanity can fall, and how, even in the darkest times, people find ways to keep going. It's heavy, yeah, but it's also powerful, and it hits differently when you realize this isn't just a story, it's someone's reality.